Alright, this video is for peer assignment 6. It is to calculate a person's weekly wage, enter their wages in hours. Anything over 40 hours is paid time and a half. We want to break it into functions. And this contains features from both Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. And it's going to be kind of a long one compared to the other peer assignments. Alright, so I have idle up. I am going to make a new file. And we'll start with our commentary. So this is peer assignment 6. And calculate weekly wage, and we're going to say with functions. And then we're going to set up what we want to do. In order to calculate the wage, we need a couple of pieces of input. We need the hours worked, so I'll just say get hours worked. And we need the hourly wage. Okay, then we need to calculate regular pay. And we need to calculate overtime pay. We need to basically bring it all together. Or let's just say calculate the weekly pay. Which is the overtime plus the weekly. And then I am going to we want to print it. So we want to print the results. Okay, so there's 6 things there, and I would say that each one of them will be its own method. So I'm going to finish this out with the date and my name, and I'll close it by closing the 3 little quotes. Okay, so that's our introduction. So let's start by doing def, and we'll say get hours. Okay, and we're basically going to do hours equals, and I'm going to do instead of eval, I'm going to do int. We're going to say that the result has to be an integer. So we're not going to allow half hours. Maybe we should, but we're not going to. And then I'm going to do input. And enter the hours worked for the week. Okay. And then I'm going to return hours. So when we have functions, there's different things we can do. One of the things is it can return a value. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to return a value. We're going to do exactly the same thing for this when we do the get the wage. So I'm going to say wage equals, this time I'm going to do float because it's going to have decimal parts. And I'm going to do input and enter the hourly wage. And close that out. Okay, and that's 2 functions now. So now we want to calculate the regular pay. So I'm going to do def, and I'm going to actually just say calculate regular pay. And I'm going to, this time I'm going to pass in a couple of values. And I'll show you how this will work later. But I'm going to pass in hours. I'm going to change it to hours. And wage. I guess I'll write out wage. And I'm going to return, well, actually, for this one, we need to figure out if it's regular hours. It's all the hours 40 or less. So we need to do a little bit of checking to make sure that we are only doing the hours that are 40 or less. So I'm going to set up a variable called regular pay, and I'm going to initially assign it as 0. And then, I guess if I'm going to follow naming conventions, I should probably put the P capitalized. All right, and then I'm going to say if hours are greater than 40, right? Because regular hours is 40. Now again, this would actually probably be better if we did a constant at the top. So what do we want to call it? Reg hours equals 40. That creates a constant. And then we could down here, instead of times greater than reg hours, and it makes it a little clearer what's going on. So if it's greater than that, then what we want to do is reg hours, or reg pay, equals reg hours times wage. All right. And then else, because it's possible that it'll be 40 hours or less, then we'll just say it's hours reg pay equals hours times wage. So it could be less than 40, or it could be more. So if it's 40 or less, it'll do the else. If it's above 40, it'll do the first. And I'm going to say return reg pay. So we're going to return the regular pay. We're going to do the same thing for overtime. So I'm going to do a method for calculate overtime. And I'm also going to take in the hours and wage. Okay. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to do overtime pay. I'm going to do OT pay equals 0. So we initialize it. And then I'm going to say if hours greater than reg hours, all right, then OT pay equals wage times hours minus reg hours, so minus 40, times 1.5. And that'll give you the overtime rate for those. And we only need to do this if it's over. So we can just, we don't need an else. We can just say return OT pay. If this is not true, then OT pay will be 0, which is what we want. Okay, so we have the regular pay. We check to make sure that it's not greater than the regular hours. Or if it is greater than the regular hours, we just do the regular hours times the wage. Otherwise, we just do the hours times the wage, and then we return the regular pay. Now we've got the overtime pay. So we're breaking this into methods. Each method should do exactly one thing. Get the hours, get the wage, calculate regular pay, calculate overtime. Each one does one thing. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do one to calculate the total pay. So we're going to do def calculate, should spell it right, calculate weekly wage. Okay. And this one isn't going to take any arguments. This one is going to use the returns from the up above. So I am going to say H equals get hours. All right. So it'll give us the hours. And I'm going to say W for wages equals get wages. So now we have the wages and the hours. So then I can call, I'm going to say reg, and being really brief here, but for my variable names, they could be longer. I'm going to say calculate regular pay, and I'm going to pass in the hours. So I'm going to pass in H and W, so the hours and the wage. I'm going to do the same with overtime. So I'm going to do OT equals calculate overtime. Yeah, I didn't do pay, so it's just overtime. And I'm going to also pass in the hours and the wage. Okay, so we're calling these methods and we're getting the return. The values they return will be assigned to these variables. All right, and then I am going to get a total. So I'm going to say total equals reg plus OT. So now we have the total pay. And then I'm going to call a method that we haven't written yet, but I'm going to call it print wages. And I'm going to pass it three values: the regular pay, the overtime pay, and the total. Okay, so that's a method that we don't have yet, but I'm going to write it right now. Def print wages, and it's going to take regular, overtime, and total. The variables do not have to be the same as what's passed. It maps them first to first, second to second, third to third. Right? There's no logic. The name could be whatever. This could be regular, overtime, total, wages. The variables could be different. So I'm going to print, because that's what this method does, your regular pay is, and I'm going to do a little bit of formatting, so we'll do that in the curly brace, 0.0:0 dot f2f. So we're going to float 2. Close the curly brace, close the quotes, do dot format, and we will format reg. Okay, so that's our first print. But I need to close one more parentheses. And then we're going to do essentially the same thing in your overtime pay is, and we'll use exactly the same format. Dot format OT. And then we'll do it again. Print your total pay is, and the same format, and then dot format total. Okay, So that's our print. Now, we're going to do a def main. That's the starting point of the program. We only need to call one thing in def main. We only need to call calculate weekly wage, because calculate weekly wage calls get hours, calls get wage, calls regular pay, calls overtime, and calls print wages. So all we need is calculate weekly wage. And then we need to call main. I'm going to do one other thing here because I want to test this in a couple of different ways. So I'm actually going to, well, let's just leave it like it is, I guess, for now. So I'm going to save this. Again, I need to go to Documents, find my Python programs. I'll call it Peer Exercise 6. We will save it. We'll try running it. So we have invalid syntax because I accidentally have a parenthesis there. So we'll save again. Run module. All right, so let's say that we're going to do 42 hours in a week. The first test is going to try the overtime, but it's going to do it with numbers that get wages is not defined. So let's look at get wages. Get wage, it's just wage. File, save. We'll try again. So we'll do 42. For the wage, we're going to do 10. Not a very good wage, but it makes the math really easy. Now, what is it? Calculate regular pay is not defined because these have lowercase c's. So we save again and we run again. Okay, 42, 10. And now what is it doesn't like? It doesn't like our regular pay, regular hours. All right, let's comment this and just go with 40 for now. Let's save again. I swear it worked last time. All right, the hours for the week are 42. Wage is 10. Another error. What is it? Maybe this wasn't... That wasn't the error. Regular pay, if hours is greater than 40, reg pay equals 40 times wage. Overtime pay is hours 40 minus 1.5. Get get hours. Oh, you know what? It's a typo. Return wage. I actually think this will work. Let's bring it back, because it's not the problem. So let's do this again. I've been told that it's useful to see me debug, so I'm letting it keep going. But I'm hoping it's not too much more debugging. Okay, so I'm going to save again. I am going to run again. So our hours are 42, 10, and that was the problem all along. So 400 is correct, 40 hours. 30 is correct for 2 hours of overtime, and the pay is 430. So all of that is correct. So it's finally working. All the big mistake was I forgot to return the wage here. So all of these were null values. It wasn't the reg hours as a problem at all. All right, so we should test this a couple of different ways. So I'm going to run it again. This time I'm just going to put in 40 hours. And again, I'll do the 10. And it should come out to just 400 and 0 for overtime. So that worked. I also want to test it with less than. So let's say they did 30 hours and 10. And it ends up with 300 with 0 overtime. Okay. So basically all three of these work. All three of those options work. So I'm going to stop this. Talk through it real quickly again one time. We did a constant for regular hours. We got our hours, right? Everything that we needed to do becomes its own method. Each method does one thing. So we got our hours. We got our wage. Again, my mistake was I forgot the return statement. We calculate the wage, and we do it by saying if the hours are greater than 40, then just do the regular hours. So basically, just do 40 times the wage. Otherwise, they're either equal to 40 or they're less than 40. So we just do hours times the wage, and we return the regular pay. With overtime pay, we just check to see if it's greater than the hours. If it is, we will subtract the 40 from the hours, because the remaining hours will then be the overtime hours, and we multiply them by 1.5 in the wage, and we return that number. If the hours are not greater, then it will return 0. In calculate weekly wage, we basically bring it all together. We get the hours, we get the wage, we calculate the regular pay, we calculate the overtime, we calculate the total, and we send them all off to print. Here we print the three values, the regular, the overtime, and the total, and we call calculate wage, which is the only thing we need to call in main, and then we call on main itself. So that will be it for this peer study.